I never imagined that after 5 years together, everything I thought I knew about love and trust could collapse in a single conversation. It happened in the quiet of our apartment, the kind of silence that usually signals comfort, not betrayal. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, my hands resting nervously on my thighs, while my girlfriend, no, my boyfriend, Adam, stood by the bathroom door, brushing his teeth. He asked me something so casually, so innocuously, that my brain refused to register it at first. Would you ever consider opening our relationship? I froze. My heart slammed against my rib cage. The words hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. It wasn't a fight, no door slamming, no shouting, just that one question that felt like a bomb detonating quietly, but everywhere at once. My hands started shaking before I even knew why. My stomach churned, and a part of me wanted to get up and run, yet I couldn't move. For months, I had laughed off little comments he made, jokingly pointing out other women's attractiveness, tossing ideas of experimentation into casual conversations. I thought I was handling it, thinking it was harmless fun. But now the truth was exposed. This wasn't a joke. He had been planning, probing, testing me. All of those nights of laughter and casual remarks, the threads were weaving into a tapestry I could barely look at. I pulled out my phone and hit record, placing it on the nightstand without him noticing. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop, to abandon the whole thing and run, but I stayed. I needed to hear him out. I needed to confront the reality of what he had been scheming. 2 hours later, I sat alone, my mind spinning, my hands trembling over my knees. He had admitted to fantasizing, plotting, and rationalizing the idea of involving others while insisting he loved me. I couldn't breathe. Everything I believed about our love, our 5 years together, was shattered. And then, in the silence that followed, I realized something else. The fallout wouldn't stop with him. His parents would be dragged in, friends would be questioned, my past would be scrutinized, and my carefully guarded trust would be weaponized against me. I had thought I was strong, resilient, capable of weathering storms, but nothing could have prepared me for this. I looked at the phone, still recording, and whispered to myself, "This is the moment my life changes forever." I'm Rachel Montgomery. I'm 31, and for most of my adult life, I've prided myself on being measured, rational, someone who thinks before she acts. I work in cybersecurity, tracking digital fraud and protecting people from scams that could ruin lives. My job taught me vigilance, skepticism, and the importance of keeping detailed records. I never expected that those skills would be the ones keeping me sane in the most personal crisis of my life. Adam and I met when I was 20. I had just started to rebuild my life after a past that had left scars I didn't show to anyone. I had trusted someone once, someone older, someone who convinced me that what he was doing was normal, healthy, even exciting. I was 17 and naive. That person manipulated me, exposed me to situations far beyond my age, and when I tried to step away, I was met with anger and control. Eventually, my parents intervened, the authorities were involved, and I learned the hard way how fragile trust can be. That experience taught me boundaries, vigilance, and wariness, but it also left a deep yearning for someone who could understand me without judgment. Adam entered my life during that fragile period. We became friends first, and in those early days, he never made me feel fragile or broken. He listened without condescension, laughed with me, and gave me space to rebuild my confidence. I trusted him completely, in a way I had never trusted anyone since that earlier trauma. When our friendship shifted into romance, it felt natural, like the missing piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was carrying. For 5 years, we built routines, little rituals, and quiet understandings. Friday nights meant cooking together, weekend mornings meant walks in the park, and evenings often ended with him curled up beside me, reading while I worked on my laptop. Our social circle was close-knit, friends who knew our boundaries and respected them. And yet, cracks had begun to form, almost imperceptibly. Adam would occasionally make comments about other people's attractiveness. At first, I laughed them off, a nervous reflex more than amusement. "I see it," I would say lightly, "but I'm happy with us." It wasn't the comments themselves, it was the persistence, the subtle testing, mentions of friends or strangers, couched in humor. Imagine if someone else joined us. Wouldn't that be interesting? I dismissed them at first, reminding myself that people notice others, that curiosity isn't betrayal. But beneath that, a cold unease began to spread. My past, the trauma I had endured, made me hyper-aware of manipulation and coercion. A small voice whispered that these weren't harmless jokes. Family dynamics with Adam's parents were another layer I had to navigate carefully. Patricia and Greg, his mother and father, were always cordial, friendly, but there was an unspoken pressure, expectations about me, about how a partner should behave. I never felt welcome to question them too closely, and yet I wanted Adam to see me clearly, without interference. In the early months, I noticed subtle comments about being a good match or settling down properly, and I'd smile politely, hiding my discomfort. I had learned long ago that appeasing didn't equal weakness. It was strategy. Our love felt steady, anchored in understanding, empathy, and shared experience. I trusted Adam with the deepest parts of myself, the ones most people had judged or misunderstood. Yet now, looking back, I realized that the first seeds of doubt were always there, tiny, almost imperceptible. And when they surfaced fully, after years of trust, they would cut deeper than I ever could have imagined. I never expected the person I leaned on for safety, the one who knew my vulnerabilities, to be the one who would force me to confront the fragility of trust again. 5 years of intimacy, care, and shared life, reduced to a question, casually asked, that threatened to undo everything. And yet, despite the fear, the trembling hands, and the pounding heart, I knew I had to face it head on. My past had taught me one thing: silence and avoidance never protected me. Understanding, confrontation, and documentation did, and I was ready to test the boundaries of my own courage. At first, Adam's comments seemed harmless, little jokes during nights out with friends, subtle observations at the gym, passing remarks about certain people's appearance. I laughed along, tried to keep the mood light, but a quiet unease began to gnaw at me. Each comment was framed as humor, yet the frequency and specificity were unsettling. He would mention Ezra, our friend from college, and say things like, "Wouldn't it be funny if he joined us sometime?" Or comment on Kelly from his gym with exaggerated admiration. Always in jest, always followed by a nervous chuckle, but I could feel a tension beneath the laughter. I started replaying past conversations in my mind. Was this casual joking, or was he testing me, probing my boundaries without seeming serious? My stomach twisted with a sense of foreboding. My past experience with manipulation and coercion made me hypersensitive to any hint of emotional risk. I remembered vividly the person from my youth, the one who had used my trust and exposed me to experiences I wasn't ready for, and I felt that old, familiar fear resurface. Friends and family didn't notice, or if they did, they didn't mention it. It was subtle, insidious, and it grew slowly, like cracks forming under a frozen lake. The more Adam spoke in this joking manner, the more my mind raced. I wondered if I was overreacting, if I was projecting my past trauma onto a partner I had trusted for years. But deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. Adam's parents, Patricia and Greg, added another layer of tension. Though usually warm and supportive, I began to notice little moments of judgment, a knowing glance when I voiced concerns, subtle remarks about being too sensitive or overthinking our relationship dynamics. I was learning gradually that they had expectations about how I should handle situations, how a good girlfriend should react. It wasn't overt pressure, but the quiet scrutiny made me second-guess myself constantly. There were other small signs, too. Adam would sometimes disappear into phone calls, smiling or nodding, but giving vague explanations. Texts would be deleted quickly, explanations offered with a shrug or joke. Each incident was minor, easily explained, yet collectively they created an atmosphere of unease that I couldn't ignore. My mind constantly circled. Was he honest with me? Could I trust him like I once did? Memories of my past flooded in during these moments. I thought about the first time someone manipulated me into doing things I wasn't ready for. I remembered the bruises, the fear, the suffocating feeling of being powerless. I reminded myself that Adam had been different. He had earned my trust over years, but the patterns emerging were eerily similar. I realized that humor could be a cover for testing limits, and subtle probing could be a way to push boundaries incrementally. I started documenting every comment, every interaction that made me uncomfortable. A quiet recording here, a mental note there. Skills I had honed in my work as a cybersecurity analyst now served a personal purpose. I wasn't trying to catch him in wrongdoing. I was preparing myself, building a map of behavior that could become critical if my intuition proved right. The apartment, once a sanctuary, began to feel heavy. Even simple interactions carried a tension that hadn't existed before. I would notice the way Adam's gaze lingered, the nervous laughter that followed certain comments, the subtle shifting when I raised concerns. These moments seeded doubt in my heart, and the doubt grew quietly, invisibly, like roots spreading under the surface. By the end of that month, I realized the conflict wasn't an isolated issue. It was a pattern, a deliberate testing of boundaries, a probing for reactions, a subtle undermining of my comfort. And somewhere deep inside, I knew I could no longer ignore it. It was an ordinary weeknight when everything finally became undeniable. I was sitting on our bed, scrolling through emails, trying to focus on work, when Adam stepped out of the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, and said it so casually it almost felt unreal. "I've been thinking, maybe we could have an open relationship." For a split second, my brain refused to process the words. I looked up, my hands frozen on the keyboard, and blinked at him. "Wait, what did you just say?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, betraying the storm building inside me. Adam's eyes widened slightly, and he put down the toothbrush, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. I mean, we could see other people while still being together. Like explore experiences together. I didn't mean to shock you," he stammered. Shock? That word didn't even begin to cover it. My chest tightened, heart hammering against my ribcage. The apartment, once familiar and safe, seemed to shrink around me. The air felt heavier. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and uneven. The floor beneath me seemed unstable, and I suddenly remembered every little joke, every casual remark he had made about other people, and it all clicked. The pattern, the subtle tests, the probing. I set my laptop aside, hands trembling, and reached for my phone. I opened the voice recorder, pressing record, placing the device face down on the nightstand. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed to remember, needed proof of reality. "Sit down," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. Adam hesitated, but complied, perching on the edge of the bed. My pulse raced. 1,000 thoughts collided in my head. Is this really happening? Did I miss all the warning signs? Memories of my past, of being manipulated and betrayed, surfaced unbidden, each one a sharp reminder of how vulnerable I had been. I began asking questions, deliberately measured, trying to keep my voice steady. Why? Why now? Adam swallowed. He leaned back slightly, avoiding eye contact. "I've been thinking about it for a while. I love you, Rachel. I do. But I feel like I'm missing experiences, things I've wondered about, people I've fantasized about." I felt bile rise in my throat. The words sounded rehearsed, almost clinical. "People?" I asked, voice tight. "Specific people?" "Yes. Ezra, from college. And Kelly from the gym." His eyes finally met mine, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "I haven't acted on anything. I would never cheat on you. I thought we could talk about it. Maybe explore. Maybe see if you'd consider it too." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his admission sink in. The room felt like it was tilting. 2 hours of conversation followed, the kind that stretches your mind and shakes your body, leaving your muscles tense and your heart raw. I asked every question I could think of, trying to understand the extent of his thinking, the people he had considered, whether any actions had been taken. Each answer confirmed what I feared. This had been in his mind for months, a deliberate testing of my boundaries, of my willingness to compromise. By the end, Adam looked exhausted, almost pleading. "If you're not comfortable, we don't have to do anything," he said softly. But I could see the disappointment, the subtle pressure, the way he had hoped I would bend. I sat there, chest tight, hands shaking. My mind raced through the past. Every comment, every joke, every seemingly harmless remark. The realization hit me like a wave. I had been tested, and he knew exactly what he was doing all along. I told him to pack a bag and stay with a friend for the weekend, not as punishment, but to give us both space. My apartment, my sanctuary, needed to be mine, free from the tension that had built silently over months. That night, alone, I replayed our conversation in my mind. I felt anger, betrayal, and a strange, sorrowful resignation. I had loved him deeply, trusted him completely, and now I had to reconcile that trust with the knowledge that he had considered violating the boundaries that I had set, knowing exactly how my past would amplify the pain. The incident was no explosive fight, no shouting, no slammed doors. Yet in that quiet, ordinary bedroom, my relationship, my trust, and my world shifted irreversibly. I sat alone that night, the apartment quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. My hands were still trembling, though the initial shock had faded into a hollow, gnawing ache. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. They all mingled, twisting inside me like a storm that refused to settle. Adam's words replayed in my mind, each one a dagger. I thought we could see other people. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I felt a creeping guilt, the kind that always arrives after betrayal, even when you are the victim. Did I miss something? Could I have seen this coming? Was I too naive to notice the subtle patterns, the jokes, the probing questions that hinted at what he was planning? The memories of my past, the person who had manipulated me when I was 17, pressed into my chest, reminding me of every mistake I had made in trusting too quickly. I felt the old fear rise, the familiar tightness in my throat, the sense of helplessness that had haunted me for years. I realized painfully that this wasn't just about Adam. This was about trust, about boundaries, about my own ability to protect myself. For a moment, I questioned whether I had misjudged him entirely. Could he have meant well? Could this be a phase, a misunderstanding? But my heart knew the truth. His casual proposal, framed as concern for fairness or curiosity, had been deliberate. He had tested me for months, gauging my reactions, and now I knew he had anticipated my refusal. I thought about my parents, my sisters, and my best friend, Chris. They had all seen glimpses of this. My nervous laughter when he made jokes, my subtle unease, but none of them knew the full extent. And yet I couldn't involve them yet. I had to face this first, understand it, and process it before seeking counsel. I had to feel it all, raw and unfiltered. The next day, I called Chris first. His voice on the line was calm, grounding. "Rachel, are you okay?" he asked. I tried to explain, but my words caught in my throat. When I finally managed to articulate the situation, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're not overreacting. He knows your history. He knows what this will do to you emotionally. That's not casual curiosity. That's testing boundaries with intent." Hearing that aloud forced me to confront my own feelings. Betrayal wasn't just about him. It was about the violation of trust. I realized I had spent years carefully constructing boundaries, guarding myself, and now someone I loved had disregarded them completely. The anger surged again, but it was tempered with clarity. I had to act, and I had to act decisively. Later that evening, I invited Adam to sit down for a serious conversation. Not a shouting match, not a blame game, just a clear, honest discussion. My hands shook as I prepared my words, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. I needed to see his face, hear the inflection in his voice, understand whether there was remorse, guilt, or justification. As he sat across from me, I felt the tension thicken. My gaze didn't waver. I wanted him to see the impact of his words, the depth of the hurt he had caused. "I need you to understand," I began, "that this isn't just about curiosity or experimentation. It's about trust. It's about respect. And right now, I feel like everything we've built together is in question." His response was hesitant, almost pleading, and I felt a pang of the affection I once had for him. But it was tempered immediately by a sharper, wiser part of myself that had survived trauma, betrayal, and manipulation before. I realized I could feel love and still make the choice to protect myself. I could feel attachment and still enforce boundaries. The conversation stretched for hours, revealing intentions, fears, and frustrations. I listened carefully, taking note of each nuance. I didn't interrupt. I didn't yell. I allowed myself to be fully present, fully aware of my own feelings, and fully honest about the limits I could not cross. By the end of it, I had made my decision. Adam would need to leave for the weekend to give us both space to process. It wasn't punishment, it was preservation. Preservation of my sanity, my boundaries, and my sense of self. Sitting alone afterward, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and resolve. My trust had been violated, yes, but my agency remained intact. I could decide how to respond, how to move forward, and how to rebuild my world, even if it meant leaving someone I had loved behind. For the first time that night, I allowed myself a long, deep breath. I could feel the weight of grief and anger, but beneath it, a quiet strength. I will not let this define me. I will not let this destroy me. The weekend alone should have been a reprieve, a moment to breathe, to untangle my thoughts from the chaos Adam had stirred. Instead, it became the moment the situation spiraled further. Within hours of Adam leaving, my phone buzzed incessantly. Messages from Patricia, Adam's mother, appeared in rapid succession. They were concerned, no, more like accusatory, questions about how I could be so harsh with their son, how I could kick him out over nothing. My chest tightened again, the familiar mix of anger and frustration clawing its way up from the pit of my stomach. I read and reread their messages, each line sharpening the knot in my throat. Patricia's words carried a subtle weight, implying that I was overreacting, that Adam was the victim in this situation. Greg chimed in shortly after, echoing her sentiments and urging me to reconsider. They hadn't even asked for my side of the story, I thought bitterly, and yet they had already decided I was the villain. I felt the familiar pull of past trauma, the fear of being misunderstood, manipulated, and blamed. But this time, I didn't retreat. I had learned that silence often left you defenseless. I decided to respond, carefully, deliberately. I told them there was more to the story, that Adam's own words, recorded during our conversation, would clarify the reality. I sent the recording, along with screenshots of the texts where Adam had casually mentioned his thoughts about Ezra and Kelly. The effect was immediate: silence. Patricia and Greg had read the messages, but no response came. My phone sat on the nightstand, its screen glowing intermittently, yet nothing. 2 days passed, the quiet pressing down on me. I wondered if I had acted rashly, exposing Adam's fantasies and thoughts to his parents. Was it vindictive? Possibly, but the alternative felt worse. Remaining silent while my own boundaries and past were minimized, my trauma disregarded. Meanwhile, my friends and sisters became my sounding board. I spoke with Amanda first. She listened quietly, her tone measured, unwavering. "Rachel, you did the right thing," she said finally. "Adam knew about your past. He knew what that request would do to you. The responsibility isn't yours." Kelly agreed, more bluntly. "He's been planning this. He tested you. Your refusal didn't create this. He did. Chris, my best friend, simply asked, 'Are you safe? Are you okay?' His focus on my well-being reminded me why I trusted him above all. Even as I sought counsel, the escalation continued. Adam's parents sent messages to mutual friends, painting a narrative in which I was unreasonable, irrational, and cruel. Their carefully curated words implied I had overreacted to a minor request, that Adam was somehow unfairly treated. Friends I thought were neutral began asking questions, seeking my response. Each inquiry, though well-meaning, added pressure. The apartment that had once been my sanctuary now felt suffocating. I noticed subtle changes in myself during this time. The storm of anger and betrayal that had once paralyzed me began to sharpen into clarity. I started recognizing patterns of manipulation, not just in Adam's behavior, but in how his family interacted with me. I analyzed every word, every insinuation, and began to see the system of subtle control they were attempting to enforce: guilt, pressure, and expectations layered upon assumptions. When Adam returned briefly to collect a few items, the tension was palpable. I watched him move through the apartment, noting the casual detachment in his expressions, the almost imperceptible smirk when he mentioned his parents' messages. I realized that he had expected me to bend, to submit to the discomfort he had orchestrated. But this time, I didn't flinch. I maintained eye contact, my posture straight, my voice measured. You knew what this would do to me. You tested me. And now your parents are trying to twist the story, I said calmly. His smile faltered slightly, but he said nothing. As the days passed, I documented every interaction, every text, every call. The evidence wasn't just for Adam or his parents, it was for me. I refused to be gaslit or to allow my past traumas to be weaponized against me again. Each record I kept became a shield, a tool to assert my autonomy and protect my emotional well-being. By the end of the week, I began to notice a transformation. The helplessness, the fear, and the confusion were still there, but they were tempered with a quiet, simmering strength. I realized that boundaries could be enforced firmly without cruelty, that accountability could be demanded without losing one's integrity. I was no longer just reacting. I was strategizing, protecting myself, and reclaiming control over a situation that had threatened to consume me. Through the escalation, I discovered something vital. My power didn't lie in punishing Adam or proving a point. It lay in maintaining my dignity, setting clear boundaries, and refusing to allow manipulation, guilt, or pressure to dictate my choices. Every text I read, every call I returned, every message I sent reinforced that power, and with it, a quiet sense of confidence began to take root, replacing the fear and trembling that had haunted me in the days following the inciting incident. The following week, the apartment felt heavier than ever. Every glance at my phone, every vibration of a message notification brought a surge of anxiety. Patricia and Greg had not responded, yet their silence was deafening. Their lack of acknowledgement felt like condemnation, like they had already decided I was the villain. I felt the walls closing in, the weight of judgment pressing from all sides. I found myself pacing, mind racing with every moment of the past month. The jokes Adam had made, the subtle tests, the conversation that had shattered my trust, the recording I had sent to his parents, and the silence that followed. Each thought became a thread, and the threads wove a tapestry of betrayal that I couldn't escape. Sleep offered no relief. My dreams were fractured, filled with shadows of Adam smiling as if he had won, Patricia and Greg nodding knowingly, my friends whispering questions I didn't want to answer. The familiar fear from my past surged, memories of being exploited, dismissed, and gaslit. I felt small, powerless, and exposed. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand justice, but no sound would come. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed one night, staring at the ceiling, hands clenched tightly, heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the storm in my head. Why him? Why now? I asked myself. Why did this happen again, after I worked so hard to protect myself? I felt the familiar sting of helplessness, the gnawing feeling that I was alone in a world that didn't recognize my boundaries or respect my past. The isolation was suffocating. Even Adam, the person I had trusted implicitly, had orchestrated this emotional minefield. He hadn't acted, at least not physically, but the mental and emotional manipulation felt just as violating. The knowledge that he had anticipated my reaction, tested me, and subtly prepared his parents to misunderstand me made my chest ache. I felt trapped between the person I loved and the network of his family, who now judged me without hearing my side. I reached for my phone again, scrolling through the messages I had sent, the recording link, the screenshots of his comments. Part of me regretted sending them. Had I gone too far? Had I exposed too much? But another, stronger part of me recognized the necessity. If I hadn't, the truth would have been twisted, my own experience denied, and my boundaries violated yet again. Tears came, unbidden and unchecked. I let them fall freely, mourning not just Adam's betrayal, but the breach of trust I had so carefully cultivated over 5 years. I mourned the innocence of that trust, the comfort of believing that love could be safe, and the hard lesson that even the people closest to you can manipulate and harm in ways that cut deeper than any physical wound. I thought about my past, about the person who had used me at 17, and a bitter, hollow echo of that fear returned. This wasn't just Adam, it was a pattern repeating itself, subtle, insidious, and suffocating. I felt small, powerless, and utterly alone. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to acknowledge it. The world seemed unfair, and I didn't know how to navigate it without losing pieces of myself. Hours passed. I didn't move, didn't eat, didn't answer calls. The apartment was quiet, yet the silence was oppressive, filled with the weight of unspoken accusations, perceived betrayals, and the raw ache of vulnerability. In that dark moment, I realized something essential. The power Adam and his parents had over me wasn't complete. I could feel despair, but I could also choose how to act, how to respond, and how to reclaim my sense of self. Sitting there, the tears drying on my cheeks, I made a silent vow. I would not let this situation define me. I would confront it, set boundaries, and protect myself. But first, I had to sit with the grief, the anger, and the betrayal. Only by fully acknowledging the depth of my hurt could I begin to rise above it. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint stirrings of resolve. The storm of emotions hadn't passed, but beneath the fear and despair, a quiet determination began to take root. I would endure this. I would face the aftermath, and I would emerge with my dignity intact, stronger for having survived the darkness. It was midweek when clarity finally struck me, not like a lightning bolt, but as a slow, undeniable realization that began in my chest and spread outward, steady and firm. I had spent days engulfed in the darkness of betrayal, anguish, and self-doubt. But now I understood something critical. The power I had given Adam and his family over my emotions was mine to reclaim. I started revisiting the evidence I had collected, the voice recording, the screenshots of his comments about Ezra and Kelly, the subtle but unmistakable pattern of testing he had orchestrated. Listening again, I felt no shame, no regret, only a deep, simmering validation of my intuition. Everything I had suspected, every tiny pang of doubt, was real. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't overreacted. Adam had laid bare his intentions, and I had the proof. The recognition of that truth shifted something in me. I realized that the fear I felt, the paralyzing anxiety, the sense of helplessness, was a reaction to feeling powerless. But the truth was, I had never been powerless. I had agency. I had control over how I responded, how I set boundaries, and how I protected my emotional and mental well-being. Then came a conversation with Chris. He didn't offer sympathy or platitudes. Instead, he asked incisive questions that made me confront my own strength. Rachel, do you realize how much control you've already exerted? You recorded the conversation. You set boundaries. You sought counsel. You've been navigating this with incredible foresight. His words made me pause. I had been so focused on anger and betrayal that I hadn't acknowledged my own resilience. The next day, I spoke with one of Adam's friends, someone neutral who had seen the subtle patterns unfold. They confirmed what I had suspected. Adam had been testing my limits for months, preparing the ground for the open relationship he wanted, and now his parents had stepped in to support his narrative. Hearing it from someone outside the immediate drama was like a mirror reflecting the truth I had been too emotionally entangled to fully see. For the first time, I felt a shift from reaction to action. The fear and despair that had clouded my judgment gave way to calculated resolve. I was not going to remain silent. I would not allow Adam or his parents to manipulate the narrative or my emotions. The recording, the screenshots, the evidence I had compiled, all of it, was now a tool for clarity and protection. I could assert my boundaries without malice, without vindictiveness, only with firmness and truth. That evening, I drafted a clear, concise message to Patricia and Greg. I didn't attack them or Adam. I simply presented the evidence, explained the context, and articulated the emotional impact of Adam's behavior on me. I stated my boundaries unequivocally: no interference, no manipulation, and respect for my decisions. I pressed send, feeling a strange sense of empowerment wash over me. For the first time since the conversation, I felt a sense of calm, not the naive calm of denial, but the grounded, fortified calm of someone who knows the truth and will act on it. I realized my value wasn't determined by Adam's whims, nor by the judgments of his family. My boundaries, my history, and my emotional well-being were worth defending. In that moment, I understood something deeper. I didn't need Adam's approval or validation. I didn't need his parents to agree with me. I needed only to honor myself, protect myself, and move forward with clarity and dignity. The path was still fraught with tension, but I was no longer a passive participant. I was a force, guided by truth, integrity, and self-respect. I went to bed that night with a quiet conviction. The storm of betrayal had not vanished, but I had found my center amidst it. I was ready to take the next steps, not out of anger, not for revenge, but to reclaim my life, my peace, and my self-worth. By the following week, the consequences of truth revealed themselves in ways I hadn't anticipated. Patricia and Greg had finally listened to the recording, reviewed the screenshots, and seen the undeniable evidence of Adam's intentions. Their initial defensiveness gradually gave way to a hesitant acknowledgement. Adam had planned this, had tested me deliberately, and had misrepresented everything to them. Adam, of course, didn't respond well. His attempts to explain or justify himself rang hollow. He tried to charm, plead, and manipulate, but the foundation of trust we had built over 5 years was irreparably cracked. Friends who had once been neutral started to see the pattern too. Mutual acquaintances who had observed his jokes, his probing comments, and his inconsistent behavior began questioning him, realizing how calculated his actions had been. The fallout extended further than I expected. Adam's social reputation among our friends took a hit, not because I sought revenge, but because truth carries its own weight. People I trusted began sharing what they knew privately, corroborating details I had carefully documented. The narrative Adam had attempted to craft, of me as unreasonable, overreacting, or controlling, collapsed under the evidence. Those who had believed him were confronted with the reality that he had been the architect of his own betrayal. I stayed calm through it all. I didn't seek to shame him publicly. I didn't post online or gossip. My actions were deliberate, measured, and rooted in self-preservation. The recording, the messages, the documentation, they were tools of clarity, not vengeance. I refused to allow emotional manipulation to dictate my response. Adam tried contacting mutual friends, attempting to spin the story, painting himself as the victim. But by then, the weight of his own decisions bore down on him. People began distancing themselves, asking pointed questions, and quietly observing from the sidelines. His parents, Patricia and Greg, who had initially been on his side, expressed disappointment and frustration. They apologized to me personally, acknowledging that they had not given me the chance to explain, and that Adam had misrepresented the truth. The most powerful moment came when Adam realized that the social web he had relied upon to maintain his narrative was unraveling. Friends he had assumed would support him were stepping back, quietly questioning his motives. He called repeatedly, each time met with measured calm from me. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I simply repeated the truth, stating my boundaries clearly. I won't be manipulated. I won't bend to pressure. This is over, and I need you to respect that. The ultimate clarity came in the silence that followed. Adam's attempts to control the narrative failed. His parents, while still grappling with their own feelings, understood my perspective. Mutual friends who had once been caught in the crossfire began giving me space and acknowledging the fairness of my stance. I realized, in a profound way, that taking the high road didn't mean inaction. It meant acting from a place of integrity, strength, and emotional intelligence. By the end of the month, Adam had moved out completely, leaving the apartment in a quiet, empty state. He blocked my number, cut off contact, and withdrew into his own sphere of confusion and frustration. Patricia and Greg maintained a polite, distant communication, apologizing for past misjudgments, but making it clear that the relationship with me had boundaries now. I returned to my daily life with a sense of calm I hadn't felt since the first signs of his tests began. The apartment, once heavy with tension and unease, felt light and open again. I could breathe, think, and rebuild my sense of self without fear of manipulation or betrayal intruding into every corner of my life. I didn't feel victorious over Adam. I felt liberated from him. The experience left me stronger, more assertive, and more aware of the boundaries I needed to protect. I knew now that standing firm, even in the face of betrayal and family pressure, was not only possible but necessary. The fallout had been chaotic, uncomfortable, and emotionally draining. But through it all, I had maintained my integrity. I had defended myself without malice, acted decisively without cruelty, and reclaimed control over my own life. For the first time in weeks, I could look forward without fear. Adam's presence, the tension from his parents, and the manipulation of mutual friends, all of it was behind me. My life, my apartment, My mind and my heart belonged to me again. I had survived the storm, and now I could rebuild from a place of clarity, self-respect, and quiet strength. The apartment was quiet again, truly quiet this time. No tension, no hidden agendas, no tests of my boundaries, just space I could breathe in freely. Sitting on the couch with a warm cup of tea, I felt a calm that I hadn't known in weeks. It wasn't just relief, it was a deep, rooted sense of self-possession. I had survived the betrayal, the manipulation, and the pressure from those around Adam, and I had emerged intact. I realized that the strength I now felt wasn't born from confrontation or revenge. It was born from understanding my worth, asserting my boundaries, and refusing to compromise my integrity. The experience taught me that protecting oneself sometimes requires difficult choices, honesty with those involved, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Looking back, I understood something profound. Life doesn't always give warnings, and not everyone in your circle will act in your best interest. Some people will test you, some will lie, some will manipulate, but you always have the power to respond, to reclaim control, and to choose peace over chaos. I chose clarity, I chose boundaries, and I chose myself. I picked up my phone and deleted the final messages, the last reminders of a storm I had weathered. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And in that freedom, I could see the future clearly. Relationships built on honesty, respect, and care, friendships rooted in understanding, and love that doesn't require testing or manipulation. To anyone watching this, here's what I learned. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you cruel or heartless. Protecting your emotional well-being doesn't make you selfish. The people who matter will respect your boundaries, and the ones who don't will reveal themselves. And sometimes the most powerful act of love is loving yourself enough to walk away. As I looked out the window at the city lights, I felt a quiet hope. Life was messy, unpredictable, and often painful, but it was mine to navigate. I had survived, I had learned, and I had grown. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer controlled me. I was ready to move forward, stronger, wiser, and more certain than ever of my worth.